1, 2, 3, 4.
Downloading the Scuba Confidential podcast. It's Marcus here again. We're back, and
Yay.
it's
We're back.
We're back again. It's episode number 10.
Yeah.
It's
Double
normally
figures.
Double figures.
Yeah.
Thank you to anyone who's downloaded this so far. We obviously really appreciate the support. And as we said on the last episode, it's been really nice because we've had some positive feedback from various places in the world.
A lot more communication.
A lot more communication, which is nice, and that's what we like. We want to hear from you guys. We like to hear what you'd like to hear from us, potential subjects, things that are on your mind, where you've been diving, any questions. We're happy to field it all and hear what you have to say. So that's been really nice. We've actually had quite a lot of downloads now. I think we're up about the 2,000 mark now, which is amazing to think, because we just started this out for fun a few months back, and it's really nice to know there's been a positive response and people are enjoying it out there.
It's amazing, really. You think we're in Norwich, and we've got people now listening to us like all the way around the world. So Philippines, Thailand, South Africa,
We've gone global,
America.
Ian. We've gone global.
You've gone global.
Global,
Yeah.
taking over the world.
London, Paris, Peckham. Yeah. Gone global. So for you, the guys who are regular listeners, you'll recognise my voice. You'll recognise the King of Bungay, who's here as well.
Morning. Hello.
And Louise is with us as well, of course.
Good morning. Or
There's
afternoon, or when if you're listening.
Could be. We've got a fourth voice you can hear today, which we'll get to a little bit later. On this week's podcast, we've got Ian's report on a new inland training site where he's been going for a little splash around and checking out. We've got Louise with the news. You're going to get to meet one of our lovely patrons who's here with us in the studio today. And we've got a listener question from a friend of the podcast, James, who's out in Kansas City, which we'll get to shortly. So,
Awesome.
First of all, I think what we'll do is we'll go over to Ian, because you've been...
Yeah, I've been last weekend I was diving over in Kent, new dive site which is now coming live. It just started, and it's a new dive site that it's been around a while. It's called St Andrew's Lakes in Horling in Kent. I hope I've got that pronounced right. Horling. It's quite a big site. It's about 120 acres in total, with 70 acres of water. So it's big, quite a big place. And we've just, when we tried it last weekend, it's like in its infancy. So it's right at the start of the site that's now going to be developed. It's just outside London. I think we're looking at about 4 miles from the M20. An old cement quarry which was flooded, and it's known locally as the Blue Lake, because summertime it's got this real deep royal blue to it.
Oh, nice.
Which, it's got
So it's
lovely
not grotty green
landscapes.
or dingy
No,
brown.
no,
or
no, it's got this lovely, because the actual water's really clear. It's just like really shimmers and just really nice. So
Okay,
it's
cool.
nice landscapes and stuff like
So
that.
it's not the normal pea soup you can get in some
No.
UK quarries then?
No. It's been used as fishing, as a fishing lake for water sports and stuff like that. In the moment, it's only got temporary buildings for diving and things like that, because it is in its early stages of the site being developed. In the future, there's going to be plans for a clubhouse, sailing club, changing rooms, showers, restaurant, possibly maybe wooden camping and glamping lodges. At the moment, it's being managed by Scott and Nina Gillum from a local rave dive centre.
Raving. Wow, local ravers, cool.
Raving and
Issued a glow stick when you arrived.
full moon party.
I know. They're really good. They're really helpful.
there.
They welcome you in and show you around, tell you about the dive site,
Right.
you know, what you're going to expect, things like that. Their history is Scott is an instructor with Raid and a PADI dive master. Nino's already a PADI dive master as well. Both got experience in the UK diving and abroad. £17 to get in, and also parking, loads of parking. And we were actually parking right down by the water's edge. Which was, you know, it's great. You know, you just unload all your gear, get geared up, and you're straight into the water.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So in the water itself, getting to the nitty gritty of it, what sort of depths and visibility and attractions
It's a
are
deep
there?
site. The depths start at about 18, 20 metres.
Right.
You walk out into the shallow part of the lake, which is approximately about 2 or 3 metres, leads you straight out into the water. Quite steep.
Oh, so it's
banks.
a steep drop off then.
It is a quite steep drop off, and that drops down to about 18 to 20 metres where you find the lorry. There's a lorry there, and you can have a look around that. A little bit further away from that, by say approximately 5 metres into the lake, that drops down to about 30, 35.
So it's not really suited to open water divers.
No,
or...
I think for the benefit of people in the States who don't want to do the conversion, 18 metres is 60 feet. So it's starting at a depth where you're going to need to do it within your training limits. You're going to need an advanced open water ticket to begin diving in there, or advanced adventurer, or depending on your denomination.
Yeah. They are looking to develop the entry to the site. So they're going to have gantries, so you can do giant strides, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you can just walk into the lake. Do you have
At the
to
moment,
access
you
it by
walk
boat
in,
or?
You can take a boat in there.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
you can do that. But you're looking at walking out into the water, and then your exit is via the same place.
Right, okay.
And that's the shallow part. In time, what they're looking to do is take some of that depth out of the where you first walk in. So there is some ledges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But obviously that's going to take time.
Yeah,
You know.
like you say, it's
And
still a
the water's
day
the water's clear, and if you go to the bottom, it can be cloudy, and buoyancy is key, because what you found is that if you go anything from like a couple of meters down to the bottom, your wash from your fins can stir it up. It's quite very fine,
quite
white
silty.
silt at the bottom, but same way that does also clear really quick as well. So you do have to be very mindful of your buoyancy, mindful of your fins as well, especially if there's a group of you. But you know, it's really nice. It was nice to try a site where it hasn't been dived before very much at all. Didn't know what we were going to find. You can see like remnants of it used to be a quarry and cement works. There's still bits and pieces sort of laying about in the water. But if you come up to say 10, 15 metres, you can swim about. You've got maybe 10 metres visibility, really clear. It's really
Sounds
nice
decent.
bit of water. So it's going to be an interesting site to keep an eye on, see how it all develops. You know, in time that could be a really good site, especially just outside London. It's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, well,
Definitely.
I think it's nice there's another inland site opening up. It'll be another opportunity for new divers to practice their skills before they go into salt water.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wish them
Yeah, it's
success
really
with
nice for Scott and Nina to invite us down to come and have a test and see what we think of it, and give them some feedback to what we think, you know. And it was very positive. I think we all really liked. If I can just give their website.
Absolutely.
address,
I was going to say, just if you can just reinforce the name
where,
of the
where
site
you can be found, where they can be found is at www.standrewsdiving.co.uk.
Okay, do these guys have a Facebook page or a Twitter account?
They have got a Facebook account. If you go onto Facebook and search under St Andrews Diving, that'll come up.
Fantastic. So there you go, a new dive site for people in the UK, in the southern part of England, to perhaps try out, give it a whirl.
Yeah, give it a go.
Yeah, support these places, use them, and see if you enjoy it. Give us some feedback if you have dived there. When it opens and it's open to the public, let us know what your experiences are. All right, thanks for that, Ian. I think what we're going to do now is move on. It's tradition. So we're going to move on to Louise with the news.
Okay, so firstly, I've got a question for you guys.
Oh.
would you free dive with a great white shark? So no, the general consensus is no, yeah? Okay, well, you've probably seen this online recently, but it was over in Hawaii, great white encounter. So there's a shark researcher and conservationist called Ocean Ramsey. Fantastic name.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Ocean
Ocean
Ramsey.
Ramsey?
Yeah.
And she's a diver.
She's a
With a name
diver,
called Ocean.
researcher, conservationist,
How cool is that?
activist. I think she's a model as well. And basically, she had an encounter with a 20-foot or 6-metre shark recently, just off of Oahu. Is it Oahu in Hawaii? Apologies to anyone in Hawaii who's thinking, what is she on about?
When Hawaii falling off the chair.
Yeah, and basically that it was thought up until a couple of days ago that it could be one of the largest great white sharks ever recorded. So yeah, 20-foot shark, so absolutely huge. So the encounter was recorded by Ocean Ramsey, a shark researcher and conservationist. Yeah, it's largely believed to be the largest great white shark ever kind of recorded or ever captured on film. However, most recently, a organisation in Hawaii, so the Marine Conservation Science Institute, actually has said that contrary to what was initially reported, it's not actually the fabled deep blue shark. It's potentially a newly discovered shark species, or a newly discovered shark, as the size and pigmentation patterns actually differ. So yeah, whilst it's not the big fanfare, the big
Still awesome to
giant
know
great
shark
white
like that is
shark,
out there.
yeah, it's still absolutely massive, and it's great that it's a newly discovered shark in that region. And
The photography for it was awesome.
exactly, if you see these pictures online, this woman is literally up close and personal, just inches away from this
And we shared
massive
it for BBC
creature.
News as well.
Did we?
We did.
Oh, bragging rights.
Yeah.
There you go. We're on it like a car bonnet. with that one.
Exactly. And yeah, regardless of whether it's the deep blue shark or the biggest great white shark ever recorded, this is great publicity for great white sharks, and the fact that it can lead to greater public appreciation of sharks in general and marine conservation. It's a really good thing. So yeah, she's so lucky to be that up close and such a massive creature.
I think that's a really positive news story. If I had one minor quibble with the whole thing, it's that in the picture, and I think it was in The Guardian in the UK and on BBC site, the picture is of the freediver touching the shark. And for me, that's one of those fundamental things of not touching wildlife and interfering with their...
Paddy handbook, isn't it?
Exactly
Don't interfere
right.
With the wildlife.
Exactly, so it's look but don't touch. And I know these people know what they're doing, they're used to these kind of interactions, but...
It's still a wild animal, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even the guidelines that were put out from the Marine Conservation Science Institute said emphasis must always be on ensuring divers, kayakers, swimmers and supporting vessels do not intentionally disrupt a shark's natural behaviour, touch or harass it in any way. And this holds for any shark or ray, large or small, for a positive encounter. So while it is tempting for anyone, not necessarily a great white, because not everyone's going to be in that position.
Go up and give it a cuddle, yeah.
Just give it a little cuddle there. Yeah.
Just as a little call back to episode 6 when we were talking about what knocks us off, don't be tempted to go and touch an animal
This is a thing
for the
called
sake of a
fluffy
photo.
or something like that.
What?
Well, at least they gave it a good name. They didn't call it like Fluffy to try and popularise it so much.
Fluffy the Great White.
Fluffy the Great White.
Yeah.
Bless it.
It's not going to have the same ring to it, is it? Okay, well, that was a nice story. What else you got for us,
Yeah,
Lee?
so another good story, if you like. It depends what angle you look at it from. So it's a report by the Centre for Biological Diversity in California, so our friends over in the US. Studies found that more than 3/4 of marine mammal and sea turtle populations have significantly increased recently, which is great. So this is a study conducted and published earlier on this month, in January, and the findings suggest that conservation measures such as tailored species management and fishery regulations appear to have been largely successful in actually promoting certain species recoveries,
Right.
which is really encouraging. So again, it's the kind of how it's an example of how when we really apply ourselves as human beings, we can have a positive impact on the environment and a positive impact on nature. The findings revealed that 78% of marine mammal populations and 75% of sea turtle populations have increased after the initial listing. So
Brilliant.
the ESA, or the Endangered Species Act, is basically, they do listings. So similar to like we do in this country, in the UK, every year, the OSPB and other organisations will conduct research and findings just to see, how numbers are performing out in the wild, whether anything needs to be done, any kind of habits and sort of patterns forming. And these results have come back really positive, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
It's nice to know that, okay, some species are in trouble, but at least we can, if we put our minds to it and dedicate ourselves, we can have a positive impact and
We're not
turn
screwing them up.
Yeah, we can turn things around in some small way. So that's a really positive story as well.
Yeah, and the results really, like you say, it's underscoring the capacity of marine mammals, sea turtles. They can, like you say, when applied, research is applied properly and work is done properly, they can recover from population
As a species,
declines.
we've got something right.
Exactly, it's
How
really
good is that?
heartening, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
really good to see, and all these organisations and they do a great job at the end of the day. And like you say, if we can really apply ourselves as a species and really kind of work together, make little changes, it's all for the good.
Yeah, have a positive outcome.
Exactly.
Is that all for the news this week?
Certainly is.
Okay, thanks
Quite
very much for
cheerful
that.
news items
That
for a
was,
change,
yeah.
aren't they?
Take your positive
Yeah,
ones.
exactly. They were nice
like
ones. Like that. Good. Okay, so last week, folks, you will have heard myself and the other guys here talking about our Patreon page. And Patreon is a crowdfunding site where you can log on, you can create a profile, and then contribute to creators who...
How can we contribute?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Ian. If you go to patreon.com/scuba confidential, you can find our podcast page there, where if you'd like to be part of our little gang, you can sign up and make a contribution towards us making these podcasts, which will allow us to do more things, and it allows you to have a voice on the podcast. So if you've got a burning question, if you've got something you'd like us to discuss, anything you'd like us to bring up, or perhaps a potential interview guest you'd like us to reach out to, we're very happy to do so. With that in mind, we have one of our lovely Patreons with us today. We'll have a little fanfare, I think. The lovely Fern is with us.
Three.
Hi.
Hello, Fern. Welcome
Hi.
to Scuba Confidential.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's all right. Thanks for coming in on this icy morning. So for the benefit of our listeners, you better explain a little bit about who you are.
Start again. So I'm Paddy Dive Master. I'm with one of our local dive centres here in Norfolk. Also did a crossover with SSI a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You, Marcus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been diving, gosh, I did a few tri dives as a kid, DSDs, on holidays and stuff, but only went on to do my open water back in 2014. So not a massively long time.
No, you've been quite prolific since then, and you've got well, when you look down the list of places you've dived since then, I think it'll make most of our listeners quite jealous.
Crammed them in, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've crammed it in, and you've been to some fantastic places and seen some amazing things in that time. And you've, obviously on the teaching side of it as well, you've assisted with me and a lot of the other guys in the pool, helping a lot of other people take their first breaths, which is such a positive thing to do as well. Now, when we have our guests on,
Yep.
there's a couple of things that we have for them. The first thing is we have a series of questions we'd like to ask you, just so our listeners can get a little gauge
Yep.
of your history in diving, your experience, what you like and you don't like, and also the King of Bungee has something for you.
Yeah, I've just got to go get that. Hold on.
So we've got a little surprise for you, Fern.
Oh gosh.
To commemorate our first Patreon guest
Ooh,
on the show.
exciting.
Fanfare time.
Oh, brilliant.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Wow.
As a support.
You promised me cake.
So for the benefit of the listeners,
Oh, superb.
Fern has just been presented with her own Scuba Confidential cake,
That's brilliant.
Because we all like cake.
because when you do something special, you get
You
cake.
get cake.
Yay.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll be posting a picture of said cake
Oh,
on
that's
social
brilliant.
media at some point, so you can all see it in all its glory.
And when we've finished recording, we're going to eat said cake as
Fantastic.
well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So it's just a little gift from us.
Oh, thank you very much.
So enjoy the cake. I may not get into my dry suit if I eat all that cake. So
No.
I'll have to be a little bit.
That was the smallest cake as well.
Is it?
Yeah, so huge,
It's
huge
fantastic.
cake, isn't it?
It's brilliant.
Good effort.
It's amazing.
And with the logo on it as well, which just
Yeah.
is
Superb.
Why not?
That'll be on Facebook and Instagram in about an hour's time.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. So, yeah, you've got a cake. Welcome aboard, Patreon. Anyone else who'd like to come on board the Patreon page and contribute and join in,
We'll
and
bribe you
potentially
with cake.
we can bribe you with cake. We're going to take that off the table now. But that's what, don't leave it too close to Ian, otherwise we won't see it again.
Yeah, I'll fight you for it.
Yeah. It's Fern's now.
Right. So, question number 1. Should we
Is that
start
me?
with you, Ian?
Yes. Okay. Right, Fern. So, been all around the world trying different dive sites, things like that. What would you say is your favourite dive site?
Oh, that's actually a really hard one to answer because it sort of depends what you're going for. You know, there's some sort of fantastic places. You know, if you're going for wrecks or if you're going sort of pelagic life or reefs. But I think overall, I would have to say that Darwin's Arch Galapagos
Yeah.
has been,
Okay.
my all-time favourite.
Why? What? Because I don't know that site. So what?
Okay. Yeah, so the Galapagos Islands sit off the west coast of Ecuador.
Yeah.
They're all volcanic as well, which is quite interesting. So when you dive, it's sort of really kind of rocky diving, and sort of get down, so you get some raging currents and things like that. But it's well worth it. Just the sheer amount of big pelagic life that they have.
Yeah.
They have there. Yeah. It's
Pelagic.
No,
Brace
Ian,
yourself, Fern.
we've been over this, Ian, haven't we?
Sorry, I just asked.
Large pelagic life is big ocean-going animals
sharks.
that come in to clean and
Whales.
feed, but essentially
Yeah.
are open ocean animals that tend to spend their
Because
their time
this
in
is
that
where Dave
pelagic
Attenborough's
region.
been as well, isn't he? Done like
I'm sure
Blue
amongst
Planet.
other people.
Yeah. It's been everywhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, hammerheads in their thousands, literally. You know, you can't count them. Whale sharks. You know, mostly, which is kind of really interesting. It's big pregnant females. And there's a lot of research going on at the moment into why they sort of congregate there. Turtles. Yeah, it's just
maybe it's because that's one of the furthest places away from us lot.
Well,
Well,
it
and
is
it's
to a
very
certain extent.
Safe place
isn't
for
it?
and
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
pretty untouched.
Yeah, I mean, for the benefit of people who perhaps don't know the Galapagos particularly well, as Fern said, they're west of Ecuador. They're part of they're owned by Ecuador, I believe. 563 miles or 900 kilometres off the coast there. They're obviously made famous by Charles Darwin visiting there on the second voyage of the Beagle, and it's where he had that light bulb moment about his theory of evolution by natural selection, because there's so many endemic species that live on those islands and around those waters there, that it became clear to him that that process was taking place, and it advanced his studies, which has been absolutely amazing to science. From what I've seen of the Galapagos, there's something like 7 or 8 major islands, places like Hood, Wolf, Bartholomew and Darwin, and Darwin's Arch obviously being there, which is this big structure, this volcanic structure that sticks out of the ocean, and it looks like an amazing dive site. It's on my wish list, certainly.
But you don't need to do a report, because if you was a whale, you'd think, hold on a minute, is there
Here we go.
is there humans there? No, there ain't. Great, I'll go there.
Yeah,
I think
let's
most
just
wildlife
go
is going to
there.
gravitate to somewhere where they're not going to be disturbed or
Yeah.
encounter
Yeah.
any
So if
kind
you was a
of,
whale,
you know,
you're just going to go, there's no humans there, I'm just going to go there.
yeah. I'm not sure it's quite a conscious decision by them, like they're driving into a Walmart car park and looking for a space.
This is
It's quiet here.
Well, I think obviously the sort of feeding opportunities are quite good as well
Yeah.
for them there, because you get sort of all the different currents meeting. And
I'd love to see thousands of hammerheads going, and that must be awesome.
Yeah,
Must
it
be
is.
mind-blowing.
It's a real spectacle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say overall, that's probably my favourite.
And
Yeah.
that'll stay with you forever.
Oh
won't
gosh,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
entirely, yeah.
And any Patreon listeners, if you contribute enough, I'm very happy to go there and review the dive site.
Research
Feedback.
purposes only, of course.
Feedback.
Yeah,
You'll need a dive buddy, of course.
yeah. Louise, what
Yeah.
are you up to?
I'll carry bags. I'll be a chauffeur. I don't mind. Yeah.
Anywhere closer to home, Fern, that you particularly?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the Red Sea has so much to offer as well. You know, it's a sort of 4.5 hour flight from us here.
Yeah.
You know, in the UK. Yeah, and you can do the sort of northern wrecks and reefs if that's what floats your boat. Or you know, if you go south again, you can see sort of hammerheads and mantas and weird and wonderful things.
Yeah.
You guarantee good diving, pretty much, aren't you?
Yeah,
Red Sea?
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
much colour.
It's never going to
Yeah.
disappoint, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, next question.
So, what is your favourite fish, or what your favourite aquatic life? Would you say?
Well, I think, you know, every diver, as we were just saying, sort of really loves the big pelagic life. But for me, I love cephalopods. Octopus,
Okay.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
just
glad
think...
you said that. It's like,
So,
what?
this is a whole new
Cephalopod.
education. This is
I think all our listeners are pleased that Fern pronounced that one wrong.
Cuttlefish, yeah.
Yeah.
They absolutely fascinate me. They're kind of...
any particular cephalopod floats your boat?
I love, you know, octopus. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're just sort of
Octopuses
alien.
are awesome to watch. Aren't
They are, yeah. They're just...
Octopi or octopuses?
I don't know.
Is it octopi?
We'll ask Samantha, or Samantha, if you're listening, you can tell us
Yes,
because you're the
to
marine
ask, yeah.
biologist.
Yeah.
They're shouting at the radio.
Yeah, they're just sort of alien-like creatures, aren't they? Yeah.
And very intelligent,
Very
by all
intelligent,
accounts.
yeah.
And they change colour.
Yeah, amazing
Absolutely.
to watch. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
explained on an earlier podcast on the thistlegorm
Yeah.
how this octopus was changing colour. I could have just stayed there all day just watching
Yeah.
that. That was
Yeah.
awesome to watch.
Yeah, I know.
Brilliant.
I've certainly annoyed a buddy of mine. Yeah, spending a whole dive just
I won't look
following
at
this
the wreck.
octopus.
Yeah. I won't look at the wreck. I'll just look at this
Yeah,
octopus.
transfixed
This is
by it,
amazing.
yeah.
It's changing colour.
They
Yeah.
are fantastic.
Yeah.
One of my favourite ones, which I've been lucky to see, and I'm sure you guys might have seen as well, is the pharaoh cuttlefish. You know this sign?
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, and when you see those together, I was lucky to be one time at a place called Richelieu Rock, which is in the just north of the Similin Islands, close to the Surin National Park, and I found 3 together, and it was clear there was one female and 2 males kind of competing for her attention, and they were changing colour, extending and bringing back their kind of tentacles, their
Are they like
nose.
magpie?
They're like who?
Magpies. Because if you see magpie, you see 1. See 2, you're meant to salute. 3.
You're on a roll today, aren't you, Ian?
It is, but it's like 3, you're meant to then wave or something like that.
Maybe this is something unique to
You've not
Bundy.
heard of that? You see 3 magpies together, you're meant to wave or salute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Has anyone else around the table heard this?
Yeah, I think you're confusing superstition with kind of just general
Oh,
animal behaviour underwater.
Yeah.
No, never heard of it.
No. Oh well. 3, 2, 1. Back in the room. So when I saw these pharaoh cuttlefish,
Sorry.
the 2 males were trying to compete with the female, and the males started to change colour, and they were trying to outdo each other by going through these different colour transitions. And they look like some sort of alien life form. If you've ever seen a pharaoh cuttlefish, they can be up to, say, 40 centimetres, 400 mil long, and weigh about 5 kilos.
Right.
So they're quite substantial. And they have this kind of blue band that goes around them, sort of glows like they're kind of a UFO floating
Really?
Yeah.
mid-water, and absolutely fascinating to watch.
It's quite
and to see-
hypnotic, isn't it? Like the
Again.
ripples of colour. and,
Yeah.
like,
Exactly
yeah.
right, and it's the same. I agree totally with what Fern said, in that I could spend 10, 15 minutes hovering there,
Just watch that.
just watching their interactions, and how they move fascinates me as well, with that kind of jet propulsion.
Because you shared only the other day about the ribbon
Ribbon eel,
and the colours coming off that. That was
yeah.
brilliant.
What used to fascinate me about them, and it's really unusual. Anyone who saw that video clip would have seen the ribbon eel moving out in the open, but that's actually pretty rare. There was a dive site I used to guide at called Deep 6, where there were 2 or 3 ribbon eels, and they generally used to live in the sand, and you'd only see they're very thin. They are literally like a ribbon.
Yeah.
And their head would poke out of the sand. But as you got closer, they'd start to withdraw. If you
But
got too close, if they
Yeah.
heard your bubbles and you were noisy,
Yeah.
so you'd have to approach them in a very
Just
delicate
don't
way.
breathe.
I'm not going to condone divers holding their breath underwater. But I would say just breathe.
Dive manual.
That's the most important rule of scuba.
Yeah.
I would say if I was at
We
20
do
meters,
often get it wrong on this show, you know.
we are just three scuba idiots.
Yeah.
But you do need to approach them very carefully, because otherwise they do just withdraw and you're not going to see them close up. The other really cool thing about them is the colour change. They all are either born male and turn female, or vice versa. I can't remember which way it is off the top of my
Sounds a
head.
bit complicated.
So they go from kind of a yellowy colour to a bluey colour, or the other way round. I can't recall. There'll be someone out there who's a ribbon-eel expert who'll be shouting at their stereo right now.
We've got it wrong.
Exactly, yeah. Anyway, enough of that. Back to everything. Should we move on? Is it me now?
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. What is your pet diving peeve, Fern? What really narks you? And try not to
Well.
smash the table too many times.
Well, I think we've all got sort of things that get on our nerves a little bit. But for me, especially sort of, I don't know, if you're on a liveaboard, or you know, you sort of can be in quite close quarters there on the dive deck, and people blasting their dust caps.
Yeah.
Especially as you're sort of bent over, you know, under
Yeah.
your legs or whatever it is you're doing, and you get that right in your ear.
Your ears are a bit sensitive after
Yeah.
diving.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's mine as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those things that just really, really gets on my
Why
nerves.
do that? What is the point?
I think it's just people habits and what
Yeah.
they've been shown stuff that they've been told is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I can't see any useful
Why?
There isn't.
purpose.
There isn't. I think, firstly, we may have discussed this
We
before,
did.
so
We did.
apologise if
Yeah.
we've been in this in detail, but I'll go over it really quickly. First thing is pointless. You're much
Yeah.
better off to use a towel or
Uh-huh.
whatever you've got handy
Yeah.
on the deck, a cloth of some sort to dry it, your dust cap before you put it back on.
Your t-shirt.
T-shirt, yeah. Your pants.
If you're wearing them.
Tea towel from the galley kitchen. Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever you can find, really. Even better, your buddy's t-shirt. Don't mess your own
It's
t-shirt
not their
up.
pants.
Yeah, just not their pants. So why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
The second thing is, of course, it's just annoying. It's going to blast and deafen someone in their ear. If you stood next to them, it makes you jump, it hurts your ears, all these kind of
If
things.
you're on a little rib or something. you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The third thing is, if you're on the deck of a liveaboard boat, then all the crew think that the O-ring's gone pop and the compressor's
start
got a
running
problem.
around.
They start running around. Just tell you what, just take your first stage off, dry it with the towel, put the dust cap on, and leave the dive deck, and everyone
Yeah.
will be much happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Anything else you want to get off your chest, Fern? While you're here, this is your moment to shine.
Oh my gosh, how long have we got? No, I just think, you know, from my experience, just being considerate of
Yeah.
others, especially when you are like liveaboard diving,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just being considerate of others. And
Yeah.
Well, it's a social sport, isn't it? Yeah.
Social sport, as we've said before, it can be a floating asylum if you've got the wrong group on it.
indeed.
Yeah.
One of you two guys should ask the next question.
What is your best bit as a DM, a dive master?
Oh gosh, I don't know. You know, there's obviously sort of things that I enjoy doing more than other things. So I do, you know, love a good rescue course. Love helping out on those. But I think, you know, everyone just we want people to like the things that we like, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, so just watching people, especially if you can sort of be a part of their journey. I think if you start with them sort of early on.
The J word.
Um,
All on a
yeah.
journey.
We're all on the journey.
All on a journey. You know, early on in their diving, just sort of seeing them progress and
Seeing people enjoy themselves.
yeah,
and-
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are probably the same, even after all these years. There's still a little bit of magic about taking someone in, even in the pool for a try dive,
Yeah.
and seeing the expression on their face when they surface, and something's clicked into place. Maybe they've spent 10 minutes struggling, and then suddenly the buoyancy starts to come together for them, and
Yeah.
they start to have some form of control under the water, and it all starts to piece together for them, and that smile on their face when they surface,
Yeah.
inflate their jacket, and then they take their rag out. So that was brilliant.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
there's something magical about that
Yeah.
to share that with someone, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me being soppy.
No, I think that's true. I think that is a good point. And,
Yeah.
It's really rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice to know, one, that you're doing something right, and two, that they've
Hopefully.
learnt a whole new life skill, and
Yeah.
potentially it's going to open up a lot of opportunities, you know,
Yeah, that's
maybe
it.
different careers or holidays, and you
Yeah.
think, wow, I showed them how to do
That's,
that.
yeah, you
and
think,
they
you know.
survived the course.
That's always good.
That
Yeah, we,
is.
we don't
Always
like
a
deaths, the
bonus, isn't it?
paperwork's a nightmare, yeah.
Far too much paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. We've got one final question for you.
Yeah. So, again, going back to your dive master career so far, who has been your funniest student, without naming names, and why were they so comical, and what made them so
Oh,
much
God.
fun?
Or it could
Well-
potentially be a dive buddy as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got a list of people you've dived with.
Yeah.
Let's keep it broad,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, you know, some of the funniest things I've seen happen, I suppose I can laugh about them now, have been when people get cameras in front of them. So not necessarily on training dives, obviously. But yeah, had several funny experiences.
Right.
Selfie sticks and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Can you give us an example, Fern? You don't have to name any names. You can just change the name to,
Yeah.
you know,
Um,
Sue or Steve or Bob or whatever you want to call the person. Just make up a name.
Wally
That
Brain.
Marcus Knight is a nightmare.
I know, tell me about it.
It's just always in the way when he's trying to take
Yeah.
pictures.
That's it. No, so I had I think we were diving St John's Caves actually.
Oh,
in
nice.
the Red Sea, which is
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. They're fantastic. I'm not quite sure why they're called caves because they're actually cavern systems.
Yeah,
aren't
it's
they?
more of a swim through thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was diving with a lady that we all around the table know from the local dive centre, just leading, you know, qualified divers. So she was at the front, sort of students in the middle, and then I was bringing, not just students, but, you know, and then me bringing up the rear. And so this particular person was sort of two in front of me, so I could see what was going on, camera in hand. And you know, they can get quite narrow, can't they?
Yeah,
those
very.
swim throughs. So single file,
Yeah.
you know, trying not to stir anything up too much. And a fish swam past, and you know, it's obviously particularly interested in this fish, whatever it was, you know, Anthea or something. And he was so sort of engrossed with taking, you know, the video of it, he started following it.
Oh.
And obviously at that point, I can't get to him until, you know, the other students are sort of passed.
Yeah.
Thinking, how am I going to, you know, let the person at the front of the queue know what's going on? Yeah, so eventually sort of get to where he went off and think, oh blimey, where's he gone?
Yeah.
You know, because there's so many.
Yeah.
They
It's
get quite
a-
complex.
It's
Yeah.
like a maze. in
Yeah.
there, isn't it?
That's it, and there's sort of, you know, banging going on, trying to get
Unlocking your tank and
that's
everything.
it.
Yeah.
Someone's attention, just let them know
Blimey.
where I've gone,
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
And it affects everyone, like you say. It's like you have to go like a conga, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, sort of like single file, and yeah, and if you go off the beaten track, you can potentially get in a bit of a pickle.
That's it.
And it's not fair.
quite
on the other
easily get
divers.
lost.
Yeah. The only benefit to St John's from that point of view is it's relatively shallow. So
Yes. Yeah.
and not much is enclosed overhead. There are some bits that
Yeah.
are, but a lot of it, if it goes wrong, the person.
You
When you say shallow, how sort of deep we talking?
Well, from memory, I haven't dived there in about a year or two, but I remember it being kind of somewhere between 10 and 20 metres. So it's not like you're down at 30,
No.
40 metres,
Yeah.
100 feet plus. It is relatively shallow, so you're normally well within limits.
Yeah.
And you can make an ascent. If it all goes wrong and there is separation, you can just follow procedures,
You could
surface and easily find the boat if you have to.
Yeah.
But it's like Fern said, people can become distracted, should we say, by cameras. They go into their own world. When I always think there's this responsibility to you and the group you're diving with, because you're not just messing it up, dive it for yourself. There might be 4, 5, 6 other people in that group with the guide,
Yeah.
and then the guide's going to have to report if someone's dropped off the back of the group. He can't go, oh well, I'm sure he'll have made it back to the boat. He's
No,
the guide is then going to
Yeah.
do what we would all do if we were leading that group,
Yeah.
backtrack down that route for a minute, and if we still haven't found that person, then it's okay, everybody up.
And it's
So
it threw a stressor into your
Oh, yeah,
dive.
definitely, yeah,
You know, you should have
definitely.
been just enjoying the dive, and it's a lovely dive site.
Yeah.
But you were worried
Yeah,
about the chap who had kind of gone AWOL.
Yeah, so I think most of my funniest moments have happened when people have cameras in front of them.
Sounds very familiar. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so there are key questions. Anyone else who comes on, whether it's Samantha, Fern, whoever the next person is to join us on the podcast, the same questions are going to be appearing.
Thanks for letting us grill you.
Yeah.
It's nice having a guest.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice having a guest. So our next question came from another patron, actually, James in Kansas City, and he wrote to us and said, so as someone who is hoping to do their open water through Paddy shortly, I was wondering if you guys could do an episode talking about which equipment you like to own or rent. So he's given some specifics here about should you buy a dive computer or a regulator, what kind of order would you buy things in, and any particular recommendations
Good
if you're
question.
starting out. I think it is a really good question. We appreciate that, James, so thanks for
It's a
contacting
question as well that when you very first start your route of dive and your journey of dive, and use the
J word.
is you do suddenly think, right, I've got X pounds, X dollars. I can only afford so much. What do I buy first?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a question myself, Louise, Fern, and you, of course, we get every week. If we're working in the dive centre, we're at a dive site, we're on a boat somewhere, it's a question that comes up time after time. The short answer is it's always better to have your own equipment as opposed to renting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Anyone who's been 10-pin bowling and put those shoes on can tell you
Oh,
that it may be the same size, but it's not going to
It's
feel...
when they're usually warm still.
I don't know which bowling alleys you're going to, Ian, and what they're doing in the shoes, if I'm honest.
You not
But
found that? It's still warm from the last person.
moving on swiftly, with regards to equipment, we will go through this, and I'm sure we'll have a little debate about it as we're going through it. But when you're starting out, you probably, unless you're extremely lucky, going to have a limited budget and going to be buying equipment piecemeal as you feel you need it. And there's going to be things that are essentials, in my opinion at least, and things which you can pick up as you progress in your diving and you get a feeling for what kind of diving you feel you'd like to be doing. So one of the first questions when you're starting out you need to ask yourself is kind of what kind of diver you intend to be.
Yeah.
Are you going to be a holiday or recreational diver? You know, are you just going to dive occasionally 2-3 times in the year,
Yeah.
or once a year on holiday, something like this, or on vacation if you're in America? Are you going to be a techie diver who's going to be, obviously that's very equipment intensive if you're intending to go down that route? Or are you considering being a dive master or an instructor, as we are sat around this table today, in which case you may want another slightly different slant on the equipment you're going to buy?
Yeah.
Combined with that, you've got the other aspect of it, which is what sort of diving interests you. So whether it's warm water versus cold water, whether it's wreck versus reef, you've got to kind of consider where you're going to head with
But
your
also,
diving.
you know, when you think about the where some of the people are listening to us from, a lot of the people are actually in warm climes anyway, aren't they?
Yeah,
Sort of generically.
yeah. I think there's going to be people who are listening who perhaps are based in Spain or Thailand or wherever they happen to be,
Yeah.
who are going to be in warm water. That doesn't exclude them necessarily, though, from going to cold water.
No.
I mean, I can remember for myself personally being in Bali and accepting a job offer to dive in Scapa Flow, and you can't get really two more extreme dive sites than that, which then meant me flying back to Europe to then dig out my dry suit and,
Yeah.
and get back in the water. So there are variations within that. It depends on where you're going to spend the most amount of your time. So when you're starting out, you kind of barrage with lots of equipment if you're in the dive centre, or if you go online particularly, there's forums and you'll find 15 different opinions in 15 minutes when you first start going on there. So it's difficult to know what to buy. You can see so many conflicting opinions on there. But I think there are some essential bits that are kind of no-brainers, that at open water level, even you really want to be considering, if you're serious about diving and you think you're going to continue, even if it's just in a holiday diver capacity where you're going on a dive trip once or twice a year to the Red Sea or Caribbean or wherever you happen to be going, that they're essential. What do you guys think are the essential bits of equipment when you're starting out?
Well, I'd say go for mask personally, because mask is it's your, it's a relatively cheap mask. You don't have to go like mega bucks with a mask. You can get one for an average money. You can have that, and they're also a nice thing to own, aren't they? They're a nice looking thing.
You're
aren't they?
wearing it on a very kind of,
Personal
vulnerable
part
but very personal
I was
part
going to say,
of
it's
your
probably
body.
your most personal bit of equipment, isn't it?
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's so many different brands and different types, styles, colours, all sorts, isn't
And
there?
fit, the
And
fit,
fit,
is,
yeah.
you know,
And it's a very personal thing. So, when I'm working in our local dive shop, and a lot of people come in and ask, I've just started diving, what gear do you suggest I buy first? And I always recommend a mask, because it fits you, you trust it, it's not going to leak. Potentially, when you're doing your skills as well on your open water course, you want something that when you clear it, it's going to clear effectively. You've not got to, mess about and get stressed about it. It fits you and you trust your kit. With a mask, and everyone's face shape is different.
Yeah.
So, like you're saying, what suits one person might not suit another person.
What I found was that I bought one type of mask, and it was really weird. Is that when I first got into diving, I thought I can't have a black mask because I'd feel really enclosed.
Oh, so like the black skirt on it.
Yeah. And I'd feel I'd have to go for a clear one.
Yeah.
So you got nice visibility, you can see all around. It's rubbish. Don't make a difference, because when you get that black mask on, honestly, it's rubbish. You put that black mask on, and it's absolutely fine.
Okay.
And
right.
and also another thing I found was that doesn't matter how much you spend. That doesn't mean just because you buy, say, £100 mask will fit any different to a
Absolutely
£30 mask.
Everyone's face
It's all
shape is
about your
different.
face.
Yeah, everyone's face shape is different. Some people have got large noses, or their cheekbones sit at a different angle. There's so many aspects, and it's a very personal thing. And certainly, when I'm helping people try on masks in the dive shop,
That mask don't fit you because
you have to tread carefully.
Maybe it's your nose.
And most people will be quite, sort of self-deprecating about it. Yes, I know I've got a big nose, and I'm kind of okay with that. And
Monty Python joke. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
it is. It's kind of.
Well, let me tell you a little
bit of a
interesting point. A little bit from history that in 13 AD.
Oh, hang on, everybody.
I
A
know.
little bit of
Blimey.
history
Look out,
for you.
David Sewell's just
This
stepped
is
into
how-
him.
well, this is how masks have come on. That the Persian divers in 13 AD,
Yeah.
they first used goggles made from polished tortoise shells, and they polished them all down, and that's what they used. And
No, that's improvising.
how's that? And they cut their windows in.
Now, are you sure about this, Ian?
No, but I found it on the internet.
Oh, it must be true. Oh, well, there you go then. Wikipedia's got lots
guaranteed.
to answer for.
So it could also be wrong.
Yeah.
There is that possibility.
Sounds like something out of a Disney,
Yeah.
film. Ariel with a shell bra,
It's a-
Details, mate.
you weren't just sat home watching Moana with your daughter, were you?
Actually, yeah. Sorry.
But anyway, getting back on the main highway again. Mask comfort is all important.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just say things to look for if you are starting out. Comfort is the thing. The fit, testing it, getting some advice. Don't just go and buy a mask online, because it's like buying a pair of shoes. They might arrive and give you blisters. So
They might
it's the
look
same.
nice,
same.
but,
You want blisters on your face?
No, I was talking about shoes, Ian.
Right.
But with a mask, you've got to check it for fit. And then there's sort of the variables within that: high volume, low volume, black versus clear. And I think, just as a little aside to that kind of depends on where you're going to be doing a lot of your diving. So as I've said to people before, you get the guys who immediately go for a James Bond black mask, which is great if you're just diving in kind of more challenging conditions where it's not quite so hot. But if you're on the surface a lot in the tropics, like the Caribbean or something like that, and you're wearing a black mask, two things happen. First, it attracts the heat, and you feel it sizzling your forehead if you're at the surface. And the second thing is when you take that mask off, if you've been at the surface working on a rescue diver course, and it's happened to me even in the UK, you have this white mask where your mask has been, where the black has just blocked the sun from going in there. So you do need to be aware of that. The benefit of the black mask is it doesn't show up the mould and mildew as they start to age a little bit, or if they get a bit battered like mine and they're in and out of the water 15 times a week when you're working full time, then that can be a problem.
I hadn't thought about the sun, though. It's a good point.
Oh, I'm not just a pretty face, Ian.
No,
You're sunburned one sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm not careful, I look like a cherry tomato if I'm doing a rescue course.
or we could just have hair.
Yeah,
It's getting personal now.
he's lashing out now. Picking on the follically challenged.
Sorry.
I found as well with because I like diving with a black skirted mask. You know, it's just my personal preference. But I've certainly found, you know, mentioning clear water diving or warmer water diving, if you want to just hop in the water and do some snorkeling, a clearer skirted mask is usually better because you've just got more peripheral vision going on.
Yeah.
So if you want to use it for snorkeling as well, I would always go for a clearer mask.
And I suppose when you think about it, if you are just starting out with diving and you buy your mask, say it's, I don't know, £40, say, or $40, well, if you suddenly say, do you know what, actually, I'm not going to go down the scuba diving route, it's not for me, you've still got that mask, you can go snorkeling.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
And like you say, you've not broke the
You
bank.
can still use it.
You know, by spending too much too early.
Yeah.
I think when you're starting out, a mask should, you know, I always think someone doing an open water course, they should be buying a mask, really.
Yeah.
A lot of centres will offer an incentive when you're starting out to buy a mask, and it's certainly worth doing. So that would be my first recommendation.
Yeah.
And a snorkel can be useful in some circumstances. If you're going to do a lot of shore diving, if you're going to be diving in places where it's a bit choppy on the surface, knowing you can have a clear airway if you're low on air or in a situation where you need to have your face in the water at the end of a dive, or for saving your gas pre-dive is really useful as well.
Certainly if you're doing your open water.
Yeah, it's mandatory at a kind of introductory level.
Rig and snorkel exchange. Yeah.
Exactly right. Look at these two professionals.
We tried. We're trying.
So next on my list, which I would recommend, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, would be fins. Having some fins that you're comfortable with, you can get on and off comfortably.
Yeah.
Depending on your environment. So whether it's full foot fins, kind of what we would call snorkel fins, I suppose, or adjustable open heel fins, would depend on where you are. Personally, I don't know about you folk here, I've never bought, and I very, very rarely wear those full foot fins. I would always prefer
What do you call 4-foot fins? What do you mean?
Ones you put on,
ones
like
you put
a
on like a
shoe.
slipper.
Yeah.
So
I use them in the pool if I'm...
Yeah, I've got some
Yeah.
in the pool.
yeah,
Snorkeling fins.
Yeah.
I think they are okay for that. Or if you're perhaps some free divers might favour them, sort of slightly larger full foot fins like that. But for me personally,
Full foot fins. You'll be saying that too.
yeah, try that after you've been to the pub.
Yeah.
But I would always favour a boot and an open heel adjustable fin, preferably with some spring clips on the back to make it easier to get them off and on. I think is the way to go. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I would say that would be your next.
And again, I think
kind
you
of
can
purchase.
try different fins to see what you get on with. Can't you? There's so many different types.
Well, the things to consider, in my opinion, again, it depends on kind of where you're heading with your diving, for one, and secondly, you may not know at the beginning of your diving career or your diving journey, use the J word again, what kind of finning technique you have, but the finning technique you have will influence the type of fin you have. So the basics, 3 categories for fins are bladed, split and pivot fins, and you also have kind of jet fins, those kind of rubber fins which are a subset of that. So the bladed ones are the ones I tend to use. They tend to give you lots of power. They allow you to frog kick, which is how I prefer to kind of move around nice and easily with a frog kick and do helicopter turns and reverse finning and that kind of thing. A split fin will be literally, like it says on the description, it's split down the centre, which is sort of slightly lighter in terms of the effort needed to propel yourself. But I find tend to be a little bit more efficient when you're doing a traditional flutter kick as opposed to a frog kick.
Right.
They're good if you're kind of just wafting gently around a reef somewhere. I think a split fin might be something for you, or if you're not particularly strong in your legs, a split fin might be a particularly good thing for you. You've got pivot fins that are kind of hinged, so something like a Scuba Pro Seawing Nova, if you've seen those, they have kind of a pivot on them and a paddle at the end.
Yeah.
Like a jet fin, don't think.
No, so something slightly different to that, where you perhaps have a hinge in the centre of the fin,
Yeah.
okay, where it literally pivots,
Okay.
and there's a blade at the end. So I think the Scuba Pro Seawing Nova is kind of the most obvious example of that. And some people really get on with those and find they give them the power. That hinging effect gives them the power when they're flutter kicking around. And then the final one is the traditional kind of jet fins, which are like your RK3s, and they've been making those since the 50s, which are kind of
A
those
lot of
sort of
tech divers have them, don't they?
yeah. And the reason they have them is firstly sort of habit. Everyone who becomes a tech diver decides they want those sort of fins, but really they're stubbier,
Yeah.
so you might not necessarily get that immediate power,
Yeah.
but they have weight. So the
Yeah.
important thing with those is they have the weight and the stubbiness. The stubbiness is for wreck diving, so you can be in a confined space and still make movements.
Yeah.
And the weight is for balancing people out. So they tend to be favoured in a dry suit environment, or if you're a tech diver, because you're then counteracting. It's like having ankle weights, where
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
counteracts the stage bottles you might be carrying. Or if you're in a dry suit, it adds a little bit of weight to help trim you perhaps in the water. But for travelling, and if you're going to be in a wetsuit environment, they are sturdy, but they are going to weigh you down. So I would say, I mean, the last trip I did to the Red Sea, the guide, unsurprisingly, was wearing Mares Avanti Quattro fins, and I don't want to just pull out Mares and advertise them, but because they're a great all-round fin, they're not heavy like a jet fin, and they still give good power.
That model's
So-
been around for years, hasn't it?
Again.
It's a classic. And
They are a bit of a classic. They
Yeah.
tend to be your instructor's weapon of choice, but fins go through different fashions, and you'll find what works for you. What do you guys use?
well, I've just got a standard pair of blade fins, some atomic blade fins, and I've noticed working in the dive shop that split fins were all the rage kind of this time 8 years ago.
Yeah,
And certainly for the centre that I work in, we don't stock any split fins anymore. And you'll see, just like clothing fashion, certain trends come and go with certain styles of dive gear. So certainly the pivot fins are very popular, and the jet fins, like you're saying, the RK3s. So it's very dependent on the trends and what people are exposed to and what their friends suggest
I dive with some
they've got.
force fins, and
Oh, see, they're pretty wacky looking, aren't they?
yeah, they are, and they're a little bit different to get used to because you do a lot of frog kicking with them.
Yeah.
And they're very, very good. I love diving with them, I have to say. And it took me a little while to get used to them. But I also, when I'm on dive master duty, I use jet fins because I find them they're just so robust. You can kick them against the
Plenty of power.
block
Yeah.
work, the blocks to quickly whack them on your feet,
Yeah.
and off you go.
Yeah.
When you're in a hurry, they're just so robust and sturdy.
Yeah.
You know, for doing dive master work, I think that's just ideal really for me anyway.
Like you say, it depends where you see yourself diving. So if you can see yourself going to somewhere where there's strong currents, Galapagos, Komodo, places like that, you want something that's going to be able to deal with those conditions. So, and again, it's also every individual is different. So some people might struggle in a current. It's not, some people are not weaker swimmers, but need a bit of extra help in certain conditions. So it depends on the individual, and also like we were sort of from the start when we were discussing, it depends where you're diving.
Yeah, I use the Mares Extremes.
Yeah.
They're
so lightweight, aren't they?
Well, that's it for travelling. They're fantastic.
I bet.
Yeah, they're really good sort of all round. I think maneuverability.
and they're quite highly rated. And I think for like you said, for travelling and as an all rounder, they're a brilliant fin to have. And it's like you said, the weight of it, the weight differential between say a set of jet fins and those extremes is
Jet fins are quite heavy.
So you're talking about a kilo or so,
They're heavy.
about 2 pounds,
Yeah.
which if you're on a 23 kilo limit for your flight, suddenly you're giving away
10%.
your clothes for the week just because you want to wear some black rubber fins.
Yeah.
So it's making those decisions when you make your choices as to where you think you're going to go with your diving. If you're just going to be locally and weight isn't an issue, then that's not such a problem.
Yeah. Do you want to hear an interesting fact of some history with fins?
Hit us in.
Here we go. So from the same site, back in 1914, so a while ago, some French Navy divers actually came up with the idea of fins, and they tried them in front of their officers and what have you, and then they were used by divers in preparation for the D-Day landings and things like that, when they were really brought to the realm of how good fins are for your feet.
What did they fashion them out of this time then?
Well, but what happened after the war,
Duck spills.
rubber and things like that were
Driftwood.
really hard to come across to use. And in the 50s, people trialled, this is amazing, that they trialled gluing marine ply to plimsolls, and that's what they used.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they gave that a go. Can you imagine doing that?
Got to start somewhere,
Marine
hasn't it,
ply
I suppose, you know,
glued to
prototypes and all that.
plimsolls.
Well, I would bet if you went on eBay, you might be able to find some.
yeah, don't rule it out.
Yeah.
Other auction sites are available.
Yeah. Anything else to say on fins, guys, as words of advice for James and anyone else who's starting out?
Straps as well, I think, are quite important.
Yeah.
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 Think about what
Definitely.
you want, what you're doing.
Yeah, so you can get the clip style, you can get the bungee style. So bungee styles are very easy to, put on and off.
Especially
if
for
you're doing
a
sort
pro.
of rib diving or anything like that, where you've got limited space.
Especially
Yeah.
for a pro as well, where time is an issue.
Yeah.
And you're quickly just
Yeah.
banging your gear on
Ping 'em
because you're
on.
keeping an eye on your students.
Yeah.
And stuff.
With any kit, you want to be, certainly once you're qualified as well, you want to be self-sufficient, you want to be independent, you don't want to be asking for help. You know, you don't want to be that person
diver.
goes, can you just, you want to be, right, let's get my kit on, let's get in the water, and you want
Don't be
anything
faffing about.
easier the better.
Yeah.
And you want it to suit you, not just as a diver in the water, but your disposition as well. So if you're a bit anxious or a bit of a faffer, you want something that's going to be quick, easy. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with all that. The third thing I always recommend people to buy, and I don't know if this is going to be controversial or not, but I always say get yourself a diving computer. For me, they're an absolutely essential piece of equipment. They've come down in price significantly over the last few years. So for the sake of around £200, about $250, I suppose that would be, you can get yourself started with the dive computer, and that's going to help you with your dive planning. It's going to be essential for your safety. It's going to be essential if you're doing multiple dives, if you're on a boat somewhere, for tracking your exposures. And when you start to get into mixed gases, as in terms of nitrox, it's going to be an absolute no-brainer to have a dive computer, because then it's going to allow you to track your oxygen exposure and those adjusted no decompression limits that you're going to have when you're using nitrox. Okay, so get yourself a computer. There are loads out there.
Yeah,
There
a
is,
lot-
isn't there? All
A lot of
different
people
shapes.
ask me in the shop, does it make you a safer diver? Which I think is quite an interesting question, in respect that, and I always say, well, not necessarily.
No.
You have to be a safe diver in yourself. You, as long as you stick to your training, your limits, that ensures that you'll be a safe diver, or in a safe situation. But I think it complements your diving, and it helps. It's just a bit of assistance, isn't it?
Yeah.
It, like you say, it gives that assistance. And
They help keep you safe.
yeah,
don't they?
yeah.
Not so much
If used properly,
make you a safe diver.
it's
just help
totally
keep you safe.
dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I agree with that. You still need to be self-aware,
yeah,
and if you're the sort of diver, and Fern gave the example earlier of someone who just disappears off with their camera in St John's Caves, and the computer's not going to save you.
no,
But if you are aware of how it functions, and if you have one eye on it all the time and have planned your dive correctly, it's superb. It's an absolute godsend, I suppose. And professionals can't do their job without them, essentially.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. If you ever see me or a lot of the guys, I mean, you two are probably the same as well. You three, sorry, I can't even count today. I have two computers. If I'm on a boat somewhere, I'll always
Yeah.
have two
Got two.
computers. I'll always have a spare just in case someone has an issue with their computer when they arrive on the boat.
Both computers, I've got with me.
Yeah.
Both decided
You
to pack
never
up on
know.
me.
It's always worth having a backup. You can imagine being a professional diver guiding people for 5 days on a boat offshore, and you have one computer and it packs up on day 2 because the battery's gone kaput.
Yeah.
If you then suddenly said to all your guests, well, I'm sorry, we're not diving anymore because my battery's died, you're not going to be flavour of the month. So I always have a couple of computers with me. But you can get started quite cheaply these days, and certainly it's worth having. Okay, anything else on
Yeah, well, I was
computers,
just going
folks?
to say, did you know the first computer?
This is Ian's
19
history session.
It is.
Time
Well,
team, isn't it?
I thought I had a little bit of history to it. 1972, Scuba Pro introduced the first decompression meter, and that's the first analog dive computer.
There you go.
1972.
Yeah, I think the first one I saw was a Sunto Gecko, which would have been 15 years ago, something like this, when they were everywhere. They were the most common dive computer. I remember wearing one for the first time diving in Thistlegorm and being amazed, thinking, what is this witchcraft? You're telling me it's like when some of us are old enough to remember when mobile phones kind of became more prevalent in the 90s, and it was like that. It was suddenly a door had opened, and from that moment, I think probably I got back to the UK after that particular trip, and it was my next purchase. So I suddenly realised the benefit of it for safety and monitoring where you are in the water and your ascent rate and safety stops and all these things. So it's absolutely key.
One thing I would add with computers is it doesn't mean that you can forget not your fundamental training, but also the very principles of diving. Like you say, depth limits and your NDLs, and that's okay. My computer will work it out for me. It's always good. Certainly, when you do your open water course, you'll still have the tables that you learned from, or certainly there'll be references to it. So it's having that knowledge. You still have to be aware of your limits and the principles behind it, not just it's all right, the computer will do it for me. You could. It's not. I think some people might get complacent with the computer, and I think that's not a good habit to get into.
I think that's a good point, because I think with using the computers and that, you have got to know how they work, and that's been my experience. Some computers are their menu systems can be quite complicated. So I think before you buy, just have a trial, have a in the shop, have a look through, see if you can actually understand how the menu system works.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know how to quickly, because you've got to be on liveaboard, and you're still trying to work out how your dive computer works, especially if it's a new one.
Or you don't want to be at 20 metres and it starts beeping at you and you think, I've no idea what's going on
what's
and I
going
don't know what button to press. Yeah.
Or what?
You still need to be in control of your computer.
You do.
Yeah,
it's very true.
That's happened to me on several occasions where I've asked someone how much time they have left under the water, giving them the signal. Obviously there's the how much gas do you have left signal, and there's how much time do you have left signal, and they just look at you blankly.
And then cock their wrist at you like,
yeah,
you
and
look
they
at
just,
it.
yeah, you tell me.
Yeah.
And if you're blindly following whoever's at the front of the dive and you don't know what your exposure is, you're just putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
Because that guide might have done completely different profiles. You might be new to that group. He might have joined and be leading that group, having been leading another group. He may be on a different gas to you. So you need to be aware of that. But that's a whole different subject. And that's for the
Just the last thing I was just going to add was that also, especially, it's look to see where the no-fly time is on your computer, because if you're going to go, but if you go buy one, you never go abroad, say Red Sea. You need to know where that no-fly time is on your computer, so you know.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got several other bits which we'll go through quite quickly now, I think. The next thing I was going to say, if you're about to go on a trip, particularly if you're heading abroad somewhere, get yourself insured to go diving. Some holiday insurances will cover you for diving, but depending on who your insurance coverage is placed with, who the carrier is for your insurance, the wording can be a little bit tricky. It can limit you in terms of depth. It can stipulate within the barriers of your training. It can say as long as you're with a local guide. There can be lots of different bits and pieces in there, and you need to make sure that you have coverage there that suits what you're going to do.
Number of dives as well can limit
sometimes. It can limit the number of dives. There are loads of different carriers out there, loads of different companies who offer these different products to cover you, but do make sure you get yourself covered. No one expects to have an incident when they're diving, and diving luckily is super safe. However, no one expects to have a little incident or a knock in their car either, and these things can happen too. So they can happen at unexpected times, and in diving, if it goes wrong and you find yourself physically in a bit of a pickle, as Lou would say, and you're taken to a chamber, it can suddenly become extremely expensive very, very quickly if you don't have the cover in place. Typical costs to go into a recompression chamber, you're looking at $100 an hour US for standard air to be recompressed, and about 150 if they start using mixed gases and putting concentrated O2 into the chamber in order to help with the treatment. And the treatment can be 10, 15, 18 hours plus, depending on your injury and the kind of table of treatment that they give you. So it can get expensive quickly, and you do hear horror stories sometimes about people who haven't got cover, have gone to a chamber and had to kind of almost, perhaps remortgage part of their house to pay for treatment to get back home, or loaded their credit card with $20,000 and end up spending years paying back for an injury that they're sustained. So do get yourself sorted with that. I'm always covered with Dan, but I don't know who you guys use.
Dan,
Dan as well.
I've used a few, Dan, Dive Master.
Yeah.
There's quite a few out there.
I'm actually covered with AXA.
There you go.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So there's lots of different places out that you can get cover, but do get cover. Make sure it's this cover that you want and is suitable for the trip that you're going on. That's all I would say. It's just having that safety net in case something does go a little bit off-piste when you're out there on your trip. After that, when you've got those key things, mask, fins, computer, you've got yourself insured, then it really depends on your budget and what you want to do with it. After that, I would normally recommend, if you're going to be the kind of person who's going to be diving reasonably regularly, get yourself some essential safety accessories and know how to use them, whether it's an SMB and reel, so you can signal where you are in the water if you've got a problem or you're separated, a cutting tool of some sort in case there's some sort of entanglement in the water, and things like torches, lamps, so you can signal to your buddy.
Good,
a good torch is always handy to have in your pocket, even during the day, to have, even if it's just for banging on your tank to signal for some attention, or for pointing out that you have found that cuttlefish. Having a torch handy is really super essential. And slates as well. Like for me, even after all these years, I've said before on previous episodes, if I'm on a boat somewhere and the guys are briefing me, I'll always be there with a slate and I'll outline the dive site, where are we entering, where are we exiting, all these kind of key features, which way is north, on the dive
I use
site.
the slate. I find it very helpful because I can't. So, I forget what bearings you're going to find. If you're planning a dive, you know what the bearings are and stuff like that.
It's nice to have it to
write
hand, isn't
down,
it, with notes and references on.
Yeah. So all those things, and some of those aren't necessarily super expensive, and they're definitely worth having when you're travelling somewhere. Having a torch is going to do the job you want it to do, for example, or having a slate that's personal to you. If you're on a trip somewhere, we're not talking about a lot of money. We're talking about £10, £15, $20, something like that, and you can get something that will help you and make you hopefully a little bit safer in the water because you'll have the information to hand.
And good clips, incidentally, as well.
Yeah.
So a good clip system. So rather than looking like a Christmas tree on the dive deck, using a good clip system,
There's always
just
one.
so you're streamlined and tucked
Keep
in.
everything in the triangle.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have all these, accessories, but again, kind of, align them properly, clip them in properly, and it looks pretty cool as well, doesn't it? Just looks nicer.
Yeah. And the final thing after that is kind of the big stuff. So I'm not going to dwell on this today. I think that could be a whole other episode because we've talked for quite a long time now. But I would say if you're going to dive predominantly in the same area, if you've got your kind of local club and your local dives you're going to do, treat yourself to an exposure suit that's going to look after you and keep you warm in that particular area, because that's always a great thing. If you know you're going to be diving in that same lake, if you know you're going to be diving and you're based in Florida and you need perhaps a 5mm suit, get yourself that 5mm suit because it's much nicer than having a rental one. If you're going to be travelling regularly into different environments, I would always say hold off the suit and perhaps buy regulators instead, because they're your lifeline. And rental regulators can vary in quality. But if you're starting out and you're going to be in the same area, a suit would be my preference between those two things. And then within that you've got regulators, whether they're cold water rated, whether they're balanced, whether they're suitable for the environment you're going into. Have you guys got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think exposure. I don't think you can ever beat having your own dry suit or wetsuit, whatever it is, and especially with a dry suit, because usually they're a bit more tailored to your body
Dimensions,
dynamics, so your dimensions. So, and it's lovely once you do get to that stage, and you can have have your own.
When you find
Makes
something
you
that
try
fits and it's comfortable, you trust it,
Yeah.
and you feel safe and comfortable and happy in it, and
Yeah.
and it affects your diving. Like any element of dive kit, when it's your own, you relax a lot more when you're wearing it.
Yeah.
I hate wearing rental gear
Mm.
because
Yeah.
you feel like a open water diver all over again. You know. So yeah, with the suit, I think that's really
It
important.
helps with the consistency as well. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And because you're sticking to the same suit all the time. Aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're waiting. You know, you're getting that little comfort.
Do you know suits date back to the 15th century?
Oh, here we go.
Hang on, brace yourself.
That's true. I read it on the internet.
Is
so
it the
it's
same
true.
site?
Yes.
They made out of moleskin or something? What were they?
And it was came about in the 15th century by a German military engineer, and he had a hose that goes to the surface.
You're
Very
a
good.
walking encyclopedia, aren't
I
you?
know.
He's done his
I thought
research
I'd
this
get-
week,
Yeah,
folks.
I
Hasn't
thought
he?
I'd get some research.
He's
in.
good, isn't he?
Yeah, blown away.
Very good. With the regulator and the suit would be the next two things, depending on whether you're a traveller or a local diver. And finally, the last sort of big purchase, I guess, would be your buoyancy control, whether it's a jacket or a wing. And again, that's going to depend on the sort of diving you intend to do, whether you want to go down that tech route, whether it's comfortable for you. Some are cut for female form and shape, which are obviously nicer if you are female. Of course, you can be male and wear one if you so
What were you
choose.
going to say then?
You're not banned from buying them if
No,
you're a male.
if you
know?
particularly want one, you can
Yeah.
be gender fluid on that if
Yeah.
you prefer. And whether it's heavy duty BCD or wing that's for tougher conditions, or a lightweight one again for travelling, just like fins, they come in different kind of constructions depending on whether you
All
want
types
something.
of colours and things, aren't they?
Exactly right. I mean, yeah.
There's so many different styles nowadays. There's so much choice available.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to spend that time just researching what you
Yeah.
think is good for you. you
Yeah.
know.
And the best way to do it, well, I know online purchasing is huge at the moment. Obviously, the likes of Amazon and Jeff Bezos are multi-billionaires in that regard. But there's no substitute for going to your local centre, for trying stuff on, for getting some expert advice, having that discussion that we've had with someone.
Support your local dive centre.
Support your local dive centre
Yeah.
for one, to keep a dive centre up and running in your local area, but also to get that advice and the input where someone can suggest to you, well, if this is your finning style, I would recommend this, or if this is the kind of diving you intend to do, I would recommend this particular jacket or wing. And there's no substitute for that in my
And just fit.
opinion.
Yeah.
And fit,
Yeah,
try
you
it
can
on.
feel something, can't
Yeah.
you, and try on. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add?
1971.
Oh, here we go, folks. Is this your last bit of history?
1971, Scuba Pro introduced us to the stabilisation jacket, or commonly known as the Stad jacket at the time in England.
Oh,
At
Yes.
the time, and
Well, like
or
white
the
vest
buoyancy
jackets.
control device, as we also know.
Oh.
Yes. And if you meet an old Beezacker, they will still refer to them as stab jackets,
Really?
actually, as instability jackets.
Okay,
And they'll refer to regulators as DVs, as demand valves.
okay,
You've met a few Beezac divers, haven't you?
yeah.
And that's not me having a pop at Beezac divers. They're lovely, but it's just slightly different phraseology they have with things.
I
that
could give you
stems
some
from that.
history on regulators and also when these acts were formed,
Well,
if you want. We can save that for another day.
I'm going to speak on behalf
During
of
the war.
During the war,
I'm going to speak on behalf of our listeners, and okay, I will. I think we'll perhaps save that for another episode on the history there. Is there anything else you guys want to say before we wrap this thing up?
I think just, again, like you say, talk to people, talk to experts. At the end of the day, other divers know about dive gear, and they've probably tried different styles and models and manufacturers. So it's good just kind of keeping an open mind. Go what
do you know
is
what this
best
is
for
all
you.
coming
Don't
back
be
to?
don't be snowballed into buying what's trendy or what your friends have got.
Do you know what this is all coming back to?
What's
This is
that?
all coming back to diving being a social sport, making friends, and also supporting your local dive centre, because it's getting in there diving. You're talking to people. You're listening to people's feedback, saying, "Well, this BCD or these set of regs, these are really great," and
Yeah.
things like that. Where if you went just online and done that, it's a lot harder to do.
It is,
and once you bought them, you can't get your money back. So at least with your local dive centre, you can You can get in there, you can learn, you can see what they use in the schools.
They'll provide the knowledge and
stuff like
expertise that
Yeah.
you need to use that equipment as well. And if there's any issue with it, if you buy a set of regulators and they fail the first time or something's wrong, you can then take them back and you know, well, what's wrong with them? I know why that's happened.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's a trust thing. I like to think, you know, you're buying equipment that's essentially providing safety for you underwater, especially regulators, like you say, it's your lifeline.
Yeah.
And
I certainly
you
wouldn't
can buy it online. It might look like a trusted source, but you don't know.
No.
Whereas if you speak
I
to
certainly
someone
wouldn't buy
face to face-
regulators and exposure suits offline.
No.
Online, I'd always definitely buy them
Yeah.
from a dive centre.
Absolutely.
You know.
There you go. So after all those pearls of wisdom, I think we're gonna wrap it all up now.
This has been an informative show.
It has
It's
been
like a
highly
history
informative.
lesson.
It's also been quite a long show as well, so
Yeah.
I think there's going to be me spending a full Sunday editing this down for folk who are
It's a
listening.
lot of coffee.
You want to keep you busy.
But I'd like to say, obviously, thank you to you two guys as usual for coming along. To Fern, our
Yeah.
Patreon guest,
Thank you very much for having me.
Receiver of the cake.
Receiver of the
Cake, yeah.
and to James who wrote in with that question. So
Yeah.
thank you to James out
Thank you.
in Kansas
Thank you.
City. And with that, thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time on Scuba Confidential.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks for listening. This is just an independent podcast and we don't represent PADI, SSI, BZAC or any other training agencies. We are just three friends sitting around talking about diving and other diving related issues, just our opinions, that's it. You can contact us on the usual social media sites: Instagram, Scuba Confidential, Facebook at Scuba Confidential, Twitter at Scuba Confident 1, email at scubaconfidential@gmail.com, and you can support us also on a site called Patreon at patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. And lastly, just want to say thank you to Plunkett for the excellent music. Over and out. Peace and love.